Hello again, and thank you for staying with us. The National Prosecutions Authority this week has welcomed the dismissal of a former acting Director of Public Prosecutions, that's Advocate Matric Luphondo. He was facing charges ranging from bribery to bringing the entity into disrepute. Luphondo was found guilty of bribing the senior state advocate in the Pretoria Magistrate Court. Now joining us is legal analyst Abigail Ngobene to look further into this matter. Abigail, good to have you on the program this afternoon. Now, Advocate Matric Luphondo's dismissal does highlight, call it the NPA's zero-tolerance policy on corruption. In your view, how significant is this action for the credibility of the prosecution's body, but also the broader anti-corruption efforts here?
Thank you very much, Tlantla, and good afternoon to the viewers of Newzroom Afrika. Thank you for having me. Yes, of course. You'd remember that the NPA Code of Ethics is particular and it outlines values that members of the NPA should subscribe to, and amongst other values, it talks to the issue of credibility, it talks to accountability, it talks as well to integrity and professionalism. And having such kind of a conviction, particularly of a person in the highest rank, to the extent that this person was occupying an acting position in the DPP in Mpumalanga. That is the highest office in the province, presiding upon the processes on how the NPA should discharge its constitutional mandate. And you'll remember that the NPA Act as well is particular to say the members of the prosecutorial team should be able to institute criminal proceedings without favor and without prejudice. And having this kind of a conviction, it sends a strong message to any other person who may be involved in such corrupt activities. And it was also alarming last year, if you'll recall, Tlantla, that the Dula Oma Institute also released analysis on the perception of magistrate towards prosecutors. Right. And they were particular to say a lot of them are seen or are portrayed to be corrupt. And such kind of activities should be eliminated in all forms.
But more broadly, what does Advocate Luphondo's case reveal about the challenges faced by the NPA in really maintaining ethical standards among its senior officials?
It is very interesting, and that is an interesting question, Tlantla. But you remember as well that we're having a lot of challenges in South Africa. In South Africa with high level of corruption, South Africa with high level of gender-based violence, where you would expect that the NPA as an institution, which is a custodian trusted with constitutional mandate to ensure that victims of crime somehow attain justice. It is very, very concerning that we have this kind of revelation where money was paid in exchange of withdrawal of cases. And one cannot avoid the question to ask as to how many other victims are suffering, having their cases either delayed or removed from the roll due to this kind of activities. And if we are to have this kind of convictions going on, then the justice, the confidence of the public in the justice system will somehow be restored.
So the NPA has cited strict anti-corruption policies also as a cornerstone of its operations. How do you assess the effectiveness of these policies in really preventing but also addressing corruption, especially within such a critical institution?
It is that their policy, from where I'm sitting, it seemed to be a vehicle that will work towards a better South Africa. And you'd remember that if you check the facts upon which the former acting DPP of Mpumalanga was convicted, this is one amongst the many cases, in as much as the NPA was particular to say it cannot rule out that other prosecutors may be involved in this kind of activities. But of course, they say they are waiting for further evidence to come on board to be able to keep this ball rolling. But having such kind of a policy and having this kind of convictions, as well as the NPA Code of Ethics, those are some of the instrumental documents that, of course, if the NPA and its officials were to adhere to, we would see the justice system and the long arm of the law reaching everyone, regardless of the position that they are holding. And this kind of a conviction, it's a true exemplary to say that the long arm of the law can reach anyone, regardless of the position and their social standing in the community.
But how might a decision like this or the dismissal of a high-ranking official like Advocate Luphondo impact the morale and operational efficacy of the NPA?
Look, It is very important to note that the duty of the prosecutor is to the effect that justice should not only be said to be happening, justice should be seen to be done. And where an NPA has to act without favor and prejudice, it should be seen to be doing that. And this kind of a conviction should be a motivation not only to the society, but also to the members of the NPA who are honest to the oath of office, who are upholding the rule of law, who are discharging their duties as expected to the best of their ability, to say they can continue being honest. Remember that Advocate Luphondo was not necessarily just a member of the NPA, but he was also a member of the legal profession, which, of course, from where I'm sitting, he holds an office. He has an oath of office on the side of the NPA. He has an oath of office as well as on the side of being a member of the legal profession. And both offices requires highest level of ethical standards one has to uphold, and one cannot turn a blind eye to say such kind of a conviction will send a strong message, but as well will also motivate those who are upholding the rule of law within the NPA.
But Abigail, from your experience and also in terms of legal precedents, how does the prosecution of Advocate Luphondo compare to other high-profile corruption cases in the country?
I think, when we look at the matter, we should differentiate between the criminal processes that are happening in the High Court, as well as the disciplinary hearing, which has just concluded. Right. The one that we're talking about currently, where we have seen his dismissal, is emanating from the arbitration which was held in terms of Section 188 of the Labor Relations Act, where an arbitrator was appointed to look into such alleged misconduct. But there's also another aspect of it which is pending in the High Court, which then looks at the criminal part of it. But as to the impact of what that has in the entire NPA as well as the criminal justice system, one can only say that we are waiting to see what will be the end of the criminal trial. But this conviction in a disciplinary manner says to me that there were evidence that was led, and such evidence was challenged. You remember that this matter dates from 2021, and we are in 2024 now. Then it speaks to the volume of work which may have been done in the behind the scene, as well as the rules of natural justice, where he was afforded an opportunity to respond. And arriving at this particular decision will then mean that all those processes were ventilated, held in a manner that is free and fair, and that led into his dismissal. And I think that is how far I can take it, Ntantla.
I keep going back to this theme, Abigail, speaking about the potential implications of this case for other senior officials within the NPA or even other similar institutions. Does the scenario exist?
Yeah, it exists. Remember that in every institution, we have just seen the issue of an impeachment of a judge. That talks to the manner in which these offices require a highest standard of ethical behavior from everyone occupying such kind of offices, where an oath of office dictate of a person to behave in a particular way. So there are revelations that are going forward to the effect that we have seen some other people convicted, and this is not happening for the first time. There are cases where highest ranking officials have been found guilty of misconduct. And one can only say that we celebrate the fact that in South Africa, the longest arm of the law reaches you wherever you are, regardless of the position you're occupying, regardless of the color of your skin, regardless of the level of education, your social standing in the community. And just to paraphrase, you'll remember that the circumstances giving right to this particular case, the bribery was to protect a certain senior official in the department. And that, of course, if we were to allow such kind of things happening, we will see people having money, avoiding appearing in court, and victims continue to suffer in the hands of perpetrators.
So Advocate Luphondo, as you mentioned, faces a criminal trial at the Pretoria High Court. How important is this trial for really demonstrating the NPA's commitment to justice and accountability? And I know this would be very insensitive, but what outcomes are you anticipating here?
It is very dynamic to jump before the drum beat. But what I can say is you remember that the conclusion of the disciplinary processes do not necessarily award the sentences which can be awarded in a criminal proceedings where the Criminal Procedure Act is particular to say in this kind of offenses, this kind of sentences should be imposed. And of course, I think the NPA spokesperson was particular to say they are gunning for imprisonment, which will send a strong message to people who are occupying highest ranks within highly esteemed institutions such as the NPA. But one cannot preempt. It will depend on the presentation of the evidence that is going to be presented in that criminal court. You remember that the state based on us to say beyond reasonable doubt, they should be able to adduce the evidence be treated and be tested in accordance with the law. He be afforded an opportunity to cross-examine the witnesses, and in an evaluation of such evidence, the court will arrive at an appropriate sentence. But from where I'm sitting, these are serious allegations leveled against him.
And speaking of these allegations, from a legal perspective, how do the charges against Advocate Luphondo, such as bribery and gross dishonesty, affect also the integrity of the judicial process in the country?
Well, I'm not so sure if it affects the process of the judiciary as such, but you remember that the prosecutors are deemed to be officers of court. They have to behave in a certain manner, and them acting within the scope of their duty is not necessarily to their personal gain. They are there to enforce and ensure not only a conviction, but to ensure that justice is done. There are a lot of victims to crime who we have seen that some of them, their cases are delayed without finalization. Some are having their cases withdrawn in court without any particular reason. And having this kind of charges being brought, it sends a strong message to say no one is above the law, and every other person who is involved in these criminal activities will be brought to book, and a prosecution or criminal trial will be instituted against anyone without favor, without prejudice.
But what steps can the NPA take, Abigail, to really strengthen its own internal mechanisms and also prevent similar incidents of corruption in future?
I think the NPA will just have to ensure that through its directorates that deals with the management of complaints, the management of how its employees conduct themselves, and its policies, of course, I'm aware of its policy, a zero tolerance policy onto the issues of corruption, the issue of a code of conduct and a code of ethics that regulates the manner in which its employees are to operate and conduct themselves. If the NPA can, of course, ensure that this kind of level of holding the prosecutors accountable, not only in the highest ranks, but even in the deep rural areas where prosecutors in district courts are operating, are able to cascade the level of accountability, integrity, as well as professionalism as the core values that they subscribe to. Having these prosecutors in district regional courts being able to subscribe to such values, we will see a lot of these things happening. We will see the integrity and the confidence of the NPA being restored, and the public confidence towards the justice system being restored.
As we wrap up our conversation, allow me to extend that thought or that question even further. How can the legal sector also, as a whole, improve its approach, especially in combating corruption? And what role can legal analysts and attorneys like yourself play in this effort?
Well, I think there's an expectation from all of us to behave in a certain manner. There's an expectation from all of us to uphold the rule of law. There's an expectation from all of us to ensure that we uphold the expectations and we discharge our duties as officers of court. But you'd remember that there are also regulatory bodies that see to the behavior and the ethical conduct of attorneys and advocates. And for attorneys, there is the Legal Practice Council. And of course, if these stakeholders can work together, and these stakeholders from time to time work in consultation, we should be able to see a South Africa that have a legal fraternity free from this kind of activities, free from attorneys and advocates who are involved in criminal activities, free from having this kind of briberies where the members of the public continue to suffer in the hands of legal practitioners as well as prosecutors.
Thanks again for your time. Abigail Ngobene sharing her expertise on the recent dismissal of Advocate Matric Luphondo and also its implications at the National Prosecutions Authority and the legal sector as a whole.